Daisy Miller, my girlfriend, posted anonymously on social media. Does a princess have to marry a prince? Maybe it's the knight who's her true destiny. She messaged me while on a business trip in San Francisco, then quickly deleted it. I waited a few minutes before asking what she had deleted. She claimed it was a mistake. But I had seen it. She said, I don't know if it was right to meet him. Maybe it's just to make up for past regrets. My heart skipped a beat. I immediately called her via video. But she hung up. She said she was having dinner with colleagues and couldn't talk. I told her I wanted to see what she was eating. She sent me a few pictures of the dishes, and I could see the restaurant's name in them. I looked it up, it was a popular spot. I gripped my phone, thinking for a moment, then opened a courier app and placed an order with a delivery guy. I set the delivery location to that same restaurant. I added his social media, telling him I was looking for someone at that restaurant. Could he quietly take a picture or video? I sent him $200 upfront. Seeing how quickly I paid, he agreed. I gave him a quick description of Daisy, and then I waited. The next few minutes were a whirlwind of emotions. I both hoped he would find her, and hoped he wouldn't. After 3 or 4 minutes, he sent me a picture, asking if that was her. Despite preparing myself, my whole body went cold when I saw the photo. She was having dinner with a man, not with any of the female colleagues Shed mentioned. Then he sent more photos, some blurry, but I recognized him, Luca. Luca. Her high school classmate. 2 months ago, she had posted a photo from a reunion on social media. And Luca was in it. I remembered because I saw a comment from her best friend, saying, "Is that Luca next to you? Still so handsome." Daisy Miller replied with a cheeky emoji. Her friend followed up with, "You've gotten even more beautiful, hasn't he regretted it?" I asked her before, Daisy, about it, and she said, "Luca liked me back in school, but I didn't agree." Then, as if to reassure me, she added, "Luca is about to get married, so stop overthinking." But the dozen or so pictures I received clearly showed something else. Their posture. The way they were interacting, it was far from normal. I sat alone, chain-smoking half a pack of cigarettes, my mind a mess. That evening, I tried calling her again, no answer. Around 10 p.m., she video-called me. She was in the hotel lobby, not her room. She said she had been at a performance and hadn't heard her phone, and that she was exhausted, so she quickly hung up, citing the need to catch an elevator. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went through her social media, hoping to find some clue. And sure enough, I found something. She had liked a suspicious post. A close-up of a wine cup. The timing was perfect, it was the same day as her reunion, April 20th. The account posted mostly everyday things, nothing out of the ordinary. But one woman's account was always active in the comments. I followed the thread, and after flipping through a few posts, I knew for sure it was Daisy Miller's anonymous account. On April 20th, that account posted something identical to what Daisy had shared on her own. "Do you remember the dreams of our youth? Like a flower that never fades." And what really made my blood boil was what I found later that night. The account posted again, "Turn off the overhead light, and I can be bolder. Keep the small lamp on, and you'll see me more clearly. You belong only to me, and I only belong to you." It's hard to describe the way I felt when I read those words. During this time, everything seemed normal in front of me. In fact, we were even discussing our wedding plans, what hotel to book, which brand of wedding dress to choose, where to go for our honeymoon. Everything was falling into place. But I couldn't sleep all night, and the next day, I asked Jake to look into Luca for me. I remembered my girlfriend mentioning that Luca was about to get married, and I had to verify it. The next day, when her business trip should have been over, she sent me a message saying that she'd be busy again and wouldn't have time to reply to me. Around noon, I saw that her anonymous account had updated with a scenic photo. At the same time, Jake message came through. Jake was awesome and helped me get the info on Luca in half a day. Luca worked at a well-known insurance company as an agent. His fiancée was a French language trainer at a local institution, living at home, so they didn't live together. Jake had also tracked down Luca's phone number and social media account. At that point, I thought it was just a classic case of old flames rekindling after a long separation at a reunion. Luca was undoubtedly a jerk, but there was one thing I wasn't sure about. Did he know Daisy wasn't single? I decided to take matters into my own hands. I created an anonymous account and added Luca, pretending to be a friend interested in buying insurance. The friend request was accepted quickly. He immediately messaged me with a hello. I played along, saying that I was looking to buy insurance for my family, 4 people, and asked if he had any good products to recommend. Luca was overly enthusiastic, explaining that family insurance had to be customized based on the structure of the family and my budget. He sent me a document to review, saying it contained their company's best products and success stories of tailored plans for clients. Then, he apologized and said he had to board a flight but would contact me once he landed. I took a look at his social media, mostly work-related posts. 2 hours later, Luca messaged me, "I'm off the plane now. Feel free to tell me your needs and budget." I didn't reply right away. Instead, I turned to message Daisy, asking her what time her flight was. She'd never told me the flight details before, saying only that the project's completion time was uncertain. But now I realized she had been avoiding telling me because she didn't want me to meet her at the airport. Daisy didn't respond. She still didn't know that I was already at the airport. I was hiding in the crowd at the arrivals, my eyes fixed on the exit. I saw her come out wearing sunglasses, laughing and holding hands with a tall man. They left and got into a taxi, while I was stuck in the underground parking lot, unable to follow them. By the time I got back, Daisy was already home. She seemed completely normal, greeting me with enthusiasm, throwing herself into my arms, and saying she hadn't told me the flight details to surprise me. Then she pulled out a souvenir of the Golden Gate Bridge from her suitcase, saying she had specially bought it for me despite her busy schedule. For the next few days, I stayed calm in front of Daisy, pretending everything was fine. While she was in the shower, I sneaked a peek at her chat history with Luca. I was stunned. I had no idea Daisy could be so free-spirited. The image of her as a refined lady in public and a wild woman in private was the perfect description. What's worse, it wasn't even in my bed, it was with someone else. I messaged Luca on social media, saying I had a substantial budget and wanted to buy critical illness insurance, medical insurance, life insurance, accident insurance, anything he could offer. I told him to create several plans for me to compare carefully. I added that if I was satisfied, I'd refer some friends to him as well. To show off my financial strength, I accidentally posted pictures of my best friend's luxury car and their villa with a pool on social media. I didn't post anything about myself to keep my identity hidden. Luca became even more eager. Every morning, he messaged me with a cheerful good morning. He would either remind me to dress warmly because the temperature was dropping, or warn me about a rainstorm and remind me to take an umbrella. Sometimes, I'd wake up and groggily think I was hearing from my mom. I'd occasionally reply with a thank you. A few days later, I came across an update from Daisy's anonymous account. "You say our love was deep but fleeting, I say you weren't brave enough for love." That one sentence made me furious. Luca wasn't brave enough for love? Fine. I'd make my move. After all, I had been talking to him for a while now, and the groundwork was already laid. One evening, Daisy came home late from a company dinner. This time, it was genuine. She video called me to show me where she was. I opened my social media and messaged Luca. He had asked for my phone number, but I hadn't given it to him, only using social media to contact him. I casually asked him about business insurance, wondering if I could buy some. He sent me a long message analyzing the pros and cons, but I didn't read a word of it. After waiting about 10 minutes, I sent Luca another message. I told him, even though I'm married, I can't get over you. Especially now that we've met again. It's like the old feelings have been awakened. But maybe it's just that life has gotten too monotonous, and the novelty is tempting. I don't want to hurt my wife, though. He replied with a question mark. I immediately deleted the message and sent him a voice message instead. I said, Luca, sorry, I sent that to the wrong person. He replied, no problem. I didn't pay much attention to it. I called him and asked if he had time to grab a drink. I was feeling uneasy and needed to talk. He eagerly agreed, saying, no problem at all. The reason I felt safe meeting Luca was that, from the chat history, it seemed he didn't know Daisy was involved with someone. She had told him that after Christmas, she broke up with her boyfriend, who she hadn't been dating for long. She lived off me, spent my money on beauty treatments, drove my car, and shopped with her best friend, all while maintaining a single image in front of her old flame. I drove to pick up Luca. The first thing he said when he got into the car was, I haven't seen you post about this car on social media. I smiled and didn't answer. This was exactly the detached attitude I wanted, no concern for material things. Luca continued. You rich people are like this. You have several cars and just switch between them. Must be nice. I think he was a little flattered that I asked him to meet. In the car, most of the conversation was him trying to make small talk, and I just casually responded here and there. As we drank, I intentionally put on a melancholic expression, explaining to him that the message I had just sent was meant for my ex-girlfriend. Then I asked, Luca, what do you think I should do? He chuckled and said, I get it, man. It's totally normal, but you've got a family now. With kids. Just don't let your wife find out. I pressed further, Luca, be honest. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? By then, he had drunk 5 or 6 bottles, and his emotions were clearly rising. Finally, he confessed. He said, I've been in a situation similar to yours. Then, like a dam bursting, he spilled everything. He said he was engaged, but during the class reunion, he ran into Daisy, the girl he had liked in school. She was even more beautiful now, and he couldn't resist. After the reunion, they ended up at a nearby hotel. I felt disgusted hearing this. But I kept my face neutral, encouraging him to keep talking. He said he felt bad for his fiancée, Emily, but Daisy kept insisting they go out. Eventually, he had no choice but to lie to Emily, saying he had to go on a business trip, and spent 2 days with Daisy out of town. Now Daisy was pushing him to break up with Emily, but he didn't want to. I asked, then why don't you seriously think about being with Daisy? He said, the thrill of something new is tempting, but it's like this plate of nuts. It's great to snack on while drinking, but it can never replace a main course. I had to admit. Luca had a point. But his mistake was that he was munching on someone else's nuts. He continued, Emily is an only child. Her parents are a doctor and a teacher. When they retire, they'll have a pension and will help raise their grandchildren. Before we even got engaged, they bought her a house, and when we get married, well, just live there, no need to worry about the mortgage. By now, my disdain for Luca grew even more. He didn't want to break up with Emily, not because of who she was, but because of what she offered. I poured him more wine and said, Luca, you're something else. You just had a reunion, and now Daisy can't stop thinking about you. He suddenly leaned in, his expression mysterious, and said, let me tell you something else. I watched him, instinctively sensing this wouldn't be good news. He said, when I came back to LA this year, Daisy reached out to me. She still had a boyfriend, but we ended up at a resort for 2 days. I frowned, remembering that this year, there were a couple of days I couldn't reach Daisy. Every evening, she'd text saying she'd been too busy to check her phone. So that's what happened? Looking back, I felt like such a fool. I tried to mask the murderous look in my eyes with the alcohol, calming myself, and said coolly, "Luca, that's not very fair." He shrugged, "It's not my fault. You can blame her for being too forward. But we had some chemistry back in school, and we both ended up trying to make up for what we missed." I thought after that night, it would be over, but then I ran into her at the reunion, and she threw herself at me. What could I do? We spent the next few hours eating and drinking, with Luca detailing everything about his time with Daisy, the meals, the nights they spent together, everything. In exchange, I fabricated some lies to make him feel like we were in the same boat. At first, I thought he was just a clueless jerk, but it turned out he knew exactly what he was doing. I couldn't stand it. That night, I went online and ordered a set of lingerie from a shopping platform, sending it directly to Emily's house. I used Luca's name, intending to create the illusion of an order mix-up, like it was a mistake. I made a decision right then to help Daisy rekindle her romance with her first love, and bring their old dream back to life. Since that night, Luca started confiding in me more and more. He came to vent, saying that Emily seemed to have noticed something recently. She started snooping through his phone and computer, and her words were always oddly pointed, like she knew something. Thankfully, he had erased all the traces. Then he said he was starting to get nervous. Maybe he really should cut ties with Daisy. He had gotten a bit too carried away lately. I glanced over at Daisy, who was on her phone on the couch, and gave Luca a sincere suggestion. "Why don't you sit down with Daisy and have a proper talk? Otherwise, I don't think she'll let go easily. Who knows? She might do something rash and confront Emily one day. That wouldn't be good." He replied, "You're right. I'll arrange to meet her in a few days." As for Daisy, I started deliberately picking fights every day. Even when she cried, I wouldn't console her. If she argued with me, I'd slam the door and walk out. This went on for a week. One day, she coldly told me she was going out with her best friend Anna and might not come back, and even if she did, we'd just end up fighting. I said, "Go ahead, have fun." After she left, I messaged Anna, telling her I was planning a proposal and wanted her to help me brainstorm some ideas. Anna responded with excitement, and I suggested, "How about you come out tonight? I've invited a few friends, we can all discuss it together." Anna agreed, and we set a time. Half an hour later, Anna called me, laughing. She said she hadn't slept well the night before and was still a bit out of it. She also mentioned that she had plans with Daisy, so could we meet another day? I smiled and didn't call her out on it. "That's fine, no rush." In the afternoon, I waited outside Daisy's office, eager to find out where her ex was taking her today. At 5:30 p.m., when Daisy came out, she got into a taxi. I followed discreetly, and we ended up at a restaurant. She entered, and I waited a few minutes before going in. I wore a hat and mask to avoid being recognized. The restaurant was nice, quiet, and calm. I told the waiter I had a reservation, and he led me to a table. Before I sat down, I said I needed to use the restroom. I walked in the opposite direction, toward a more secluded spot, and started scanning the room. Sure enough, I spotted them. Daisy was absolutely radiant, smiling throughout, often touching and playfully interacting with Luca. I snapped a few photos when they weren't looking. I had originally planned to call Luca's fiancée, Emily, and send her the photos along with the restaurant's address. Emily had been suspicious lately but had found no solid proof. But now, the two were just eating together. Even if I sent her the address, she might not come. And if she did, Luca might talk his way out of it, or worse. And maybe Luca will be more careful from now on. So I decided to wait a little longer. A twisted part of me, to my horror, began hoping that they would head to a hotel after dinner. I sat in my car, waiting for nearly an hour. Finally, they came out. I suspect Luca hasn't /T said and he /S going to end it with Daisy, or Daisy wouldn't /T be filled with joy as the two go straight to the hotel next door, hand in hand. I quickly followed them and secretly recorded a video of them entering the hotel. The hotel lobby was too small for me to follow them in openly. I started calling Emily. I told her, "Your fiancé, Luca, is in a hotel room with another woman." At first, she didn't believe me, so I suggested we connect on social media, offering to provide proof. I then added Emily from an anonymous account and sent her the video. She immediately called me back, anxiously asking who the woman in the photo was and who I was. I didn't say anything but sent her the hotel address and urged her to come quickly before they left. About half an hour later, Emily arrived, accompanied by a female friend and a burly man. The three of them stormed in, heading straight for the front desk to argue. I didn't need to hear it to know, they were demanding to know which room Luca was in. When the front desk wouldn't tell them, a heated argument broke out. I called Daisy, but as expected, she didn't answer. I then called her best friend, Anna, who also didn't pick up, maybe feeling guilty. So I sent both Daisy and Anna a message, saying I felt I had gone too far recently. I was on my way to Anna's house to pick her up. Anna quickly called me back. On the phone, she told me Daisy was still upset and that I didn't need to come. I insisted. That's even more reason for me to come. I won't be able to sleep tonight if I don't pick her up. Anna's tone became a bit awkward as she said, "Wait, let me check with her first." I replied, "Fine, but if she doesn't respond, I'll go to your house and apologize in person." After hanging up, I calmly waited. Around 20 minutes later, the hotel elevator opened, and Daisy and Luca appeared. They ran into Emily and her companions, who were still arguing at the front desk. Everyone froze for a moment, and Emily was enraged. Without a word, she slapped Daisy several times. I was shocked to see how furious Emily was. She wasn't holding back at all. After slapping her, she kicked Daisy and shouted that she was a woman who seduced men. Daisy screamed in pain and tried to hide behind Luca, yelling, "What's wrong with you? Why are you hitting me? I'm calling the police." This only made Emily angrier. She signaled for the burly man to hold Luca back while she and her other female friend began to attack Daisy, beating her until she was curled up on the floor, helpless. "Dirty bitch, don't act innocent here. You've been sleeping with him. And that I'm trying to discredit you?" Then Emily did something I never expected. She pulled a set of lingerie out of her bag and threw it on Daisy's head. It was the same lingerie I had sent to Emily. "Here, let everyone see how slutty you are. This is for you, right? Why don't you wear it now and show everyone?" The scene caused quite a stir. The onlookers pulled out their phones to record, and I did too. The front desk and security tried to intervene, but the burly man shouted at them, "Go ahead. Call the police. I'll report that you're running a prostitution ring here. Daisy clearly works in the sex trade. If you try to stop us, you're covering up illegal activities." His intimidation was so overwhelming that the hotel staff was too scared to do anything. Luca was terrified, shouting for them to stop, but Emily yelled, "I'll finish this bitch off first, then deal with you." It was so satisfying, too satisfying. I really wanted to keep watching, but I had more important things to prepare, so I left. An hour later, Anna returned my call and said that Daisy had drunk too much and was already asleep at one of their friends' houses. However, she reassured me that she would be with Daisy and that I shouldn't worry. I said, "Okay, I'm not worried." The next morning, I called Daisy. Her voice sounded down, and she said she would come home that night. Alright, just come home. I was worried you wouldn't. At 9 p.m., my girlfriend walked in, looking exhausted. If you looked closely, her face seemed a bit swollen. She froze as soon as she entered. The entire living room had been transformed into a dreamy setup. White and pink balloons floated from the ceiling, and I had arranged a path of red candles on the floor, with rose petals scattered along the way. In the center of the room was a massive heart-shaped arrangement of roses, and in the middle of the roses was a light sign that read, "Marry Me." Her parents were also there. It only took them 2 hours to drive from their home to Los Angeles. And I had invited Mr. and Mrs. Miller over specifically. In addition to her best friend Anna, I had also invited several other classmates, and the room was packed with people. The TV was playing a slideshow of our photos. The atmosphere was romantically touching. I stood in front of her, handed her a bouquet of flowers, and said with sincere emotion, "I haven't been good to you lately. I've reflected on my mistakes and decided to treat you even better from now on. I'm thankful for the days you've been with me. And I believe that our future will be even sweeter. The sense of security and stability you want, I will give you. Today, in front of your family and friends, I promise that before we marry, I will buy a house and a car, both in your name. I'll give you the security you deserve." My girlfriend couldn't hold it in anymore, covering her mouth as tears streamed down her face. She had been humiliated and beaten by others the night before, and today, she was surrounded by warmth. Plus, I was willing to buy her a car and a house. She was deeply moved. Mr. and Mrs. Miller's eyes lit up. And they urged her to respond. The other guests, in awe, cheered and urged her, "Say yes, say yes." She was overwhelmed with emotion, ready to speak, when my phone rang. Actually, the ringtone had been set up in advance, and I unmuted it at just the right moment. I pretended to take the phone out, but as I looked at it, my face darkened. The whole room fell silent, not knowing what was happening. I gave her one last deep look, then walked over to Mr. and Mrs. Miller, saying, "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, the proposal might need to be postponed." Mr. and Mrs. Miller were instantly alarmed, asking me what was going on. I didn't answer. Instead, I cast my phone screen to the TV and said, "You can see for yourselves." On the screen appeared a picture of Daisy and Luca eating together, both looking incredibly happy. My girlfriend, still with tears on her face, froze when she saw the photo and blurted out, "Who took this?" I replied, "I don't know. Someone sent it to me. But judging by the timestamp, it was taken during the days you were in San Francisco on business. Don't you think it's time to explain yourself?" Her expression shifted awkwardly, but she quickly defended herself. "We just ran into a classmate while I was on business and had a meal together. What's the big deal?" I knew she would say that. I calmly swiped to the next photo. The second photo showed Daisy feeding Luca with her own spoon. The atmosphere immediately became awkward. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, her classmates, everyone turned to look at Daisy. Her eyes darted around, clearly nervous. But she held on, saying, "It's definitely not what you think. I was just testing the dish to make sure it wasn't too spicy for him." I stayed completely composed, feeling an odd sense of satisfaction like a cat playing with a mouse. "It's okay. Keep on lying. I won't be mad. This is just the beginning." The next image appeared, the two of them holding hands, walking out of the airport together. Mrs. Miller couldn't take it anymore and asked Daisy, "Who is this man?" Daisy, already stumbling over her words, replied, "He's just a classmate," but her voice lacked conviction. Mrs. Miller slapped her back sharply, telling her to hurry up and explain herself. Or I/D misunderstand. She said it was just a coincidence that they were on the same flight. She had twisted her ankle when getting off the plane, so he helped her. There was absolutely nothing inappropriate between them. Don_T be ridiculous. I stayed silent the whole time, not questioning or getting angry. After all, such a pathetic excuse was clear to everyone there. We weren't_T all idiots, we could all tell what was going on. And then there was a video. Daisy almost lost her balance when she glanced at it. The two of them entered the hotel together. It was the one I had filmed yesterday. I asked her calmly, another coincidence? Then, I played the best part of last night_S drama. Daisy was beaten and yelled at by Luca_S fiancée, Emily, until she ended up with her underwear over her head, looking as ridiculous as it gets. Mr. and Mrs. Miller could barely watch. I sighed, sank into the couch, and buried my face in my hands, afraid I_D start laughing. Mrs. Miller trembled as she said there must be some misunderstanding and urged me to speak with Daisy alone to clear it up. By then, her classmates had already left. Once everyone was gone, Mr. Miller suddenly slapped her across the face. She was both embarrassed and angry, crying uncontrollably. Mr. Miller said, "Chris, she_S been spoiled by me and her mother, but deep down she_S not a bad person. You know that. You two are about to get married. I believe everything can be talked through, don't give up on each other so easily." I rubbed my temples, looking exhausted. I said, "Mr. Miller, I was looking forward to having you here today, but as you can see, someone sent me these things to make me face the truth. My mind is a mess right now, and I need some time alone. Maybe you should take her home, and we'll both calm down before talking." Then, without even looking at Daisy, I went to my bedroom. I'm not sure when Mr. and Mrs. Miller left, but Daisy tried to talk to me. And I didn't open the door. That night, Daisy sent me a ton of messages. In the early hours, she was extremely apologetic, promising that from that moment on, she would listen to me and never complain again, that she'd be completely devoted to me. By the middle of the night, she had completely flipped, accusing me of not understanding what she really wanted, and that all I cared about was spending money on her. The next morning, Daisy was gone, and by noon, her best friend Anna told me Daisy was moving in with her. The Millers called later, saying they'd given Daisy a good talking to and begged me to forgive her this time, assuring me she wouldn't make the same mistake again. I ignored them completely. In the meantime, I checked Daisy's anonymous account, and she had posted something new. Does the princess have to marry the prince? Maybe the night is her true destiny. I went to talk to Luca and got some good news. It went much more smoothly than I'd expected. Luca had broken up with Emily. A breakup was the right move, how else would they relive their old memories? I had been worried that Emily would be the one unwilling to let go. Feigning concern, I urged him to go after Daisy. I told him, "You're lucky, this beautiful woman can't get over you. If I were you, I'd be crying from how touched I'd be." I added, "My regrets can't be fixed, but you still have a chance. Don't miss it." Luca, probably scolded by Emily, seemed to have some rebellious energy building up and kept agreeing with me. I said, "I wish you a lifetime of happiness." A few days later, Daisy sent me a message saying we should go our separate ways and not bother each other anymore. I checked her anonymous account again, and she had posted a picture of her holding hands with someone. This time, I choose love. I turned off my phone, packed up everything she'd left at my place, and had it sent straight to Anna's. In the following days, I made excuses, saying I was on a business trip, and didn't pay much attention to Luca's inquiries about the insurance. I hired a few people to make complaints to Luca's company, initially planning to flood him with dozens, maybe even hundreds, of calls. But then I reconsidered, it would be too obvious, too forced. Instead, I kept it to 1 or 2 complaints a week. That was more than enough to get under his skin. I often checked Daisy's anonymous account, which had now turned into a diary of a passionate romance. About a month later, I figured it was time, so I used the same trick again. I sent Daisy a message from a strange number, telling her that Luca had gone to see Emily. Of course, they had a huge argument. When Luca came to vent to me, he complained about how he must be having the worst luck this year. Everything always going wrong. He was getting scolded at work daily, and his new girlfriend, who had seemed so sweet at first, had started picking fights. Women were all the same, so annoying. I replied, Luca, what are you saying? You've got a beautiful girlfriend who loves you. People would be jealous of you. He said the honeymoon phase was over, and now he regretted it. Women, he said, once you've been with them a while, they're all the same. Daisy's just too much of a spoiled princess. She never steps into the kitchen and thinks housework is beneath her. His ex-fiancée Emily at least was diligent. She'd come over to clean and cook even when they didn't live together. Daisy doesn't even know how to open the fridge properly. His work wasn't going well, and he didn't have the patience to deal with Daisy. The two of them now had small arguments every few days, and big ones once a week. I cursed him in my mind but just comforted him with some bland words, saying, it's normal in relationships. Luca, you just need to work through it. Behind the scenes, I kept up the complaints about him at the same frequency. One day, he suddenly came to me looking downcast and suggested we go for drinks. I agreed, saying it had been a while since we'd hung out. We went to the same bar as before. After 2 drinks, Luca started to unload. He said he'd been fired from his job. I feigned surprise. What happened? He looked really depressed and started cursing, complaining about how people just didn't know what they wanted, and if they weren't happy with something, they'd complain and ruin his job. I patted his shoulder, reassuring him, it's okay, Luca. Jobs come and go. You'll find another one. He even apologized, saying he hadn't been able to offer me any services yet. I pretended to be annoyed. You're not treating me like a friend. He gave me a bitter smile. You don't understand. I have to deal with a bunch of picky people at work, and then I go home to Daisy, who spends all my money. He couldn't understand how women had so many things they wanted to buy. After being with Daisy for a month, he had already spent over $100,000 on her. And she was pushing him to buy a car and a house, asking why he hadn't done it already by now, enjoy it sooner. Luca said, do you hear what she's saying? Just because I don't have a car or a house doesn't mean I don't want them. I shook my head. Luca, I have faith in you. You'll get there. You'll have it all, eventually. That night, I stayed with him and listened to him complain, drinking more than I usually would. Hearing him regret it all made me happy. Every time he mentioned how badly they were getting along, I felt a strange satisfaction. After my conversation with Luca, I suddenly remembered I hadn't frozen Daisy's credit card yet. I checked, and to my surprise, she had been spending on it for the past month. I froze it immediately. The next day, she called me, furious, demanding to know why I had frozen her card. I was caught off guard. After a brief pause, I responded, maybe I just didn't want to keep supporting someone else's wife? Then, she suddenly burst into tears, accusing me of being heartless. She claimed that she had gotten closer to Luca but had never done anything wrong by me. How could I forget the good times we shared? She assumed I didn't know. But I already knew. She and Luca had gotten together and were living together. I said, you two were holding hands entering the hotel. She insisted, we each had our own room. Don_T make me take out the video of you guys going into the room too. It_S better to save each other some last face. She fell silent. After a moment, she said, well, we booked a double room. Do you believe we each had our own bed? I snapped, get lost. Her friend Anna was really good to her, occasionally dropping hints to ask if I still had feelings for her, if we could ever get back together. What do you think? I'm a normal guy, not some idiot from a TV show or novel. That night, Luca returned home, sober and ashamed. The next day, he apologized, saying, "You're such a busy person. I hope I didn't waste your time by unloading all this on you." I reassured him, "Luca, don't think like that. If you ever need to talk or vent, I'm here for you." His misfortunes provide me with joy. A month later, Luca told me he couldn't take it anymore and had broken up with Daisy. No kidding. I'd seen it coming from the start. I checked Daisy's anonymous account again. The usual sentimental ramblings were gone. Leaving only a single post, "Confused the streetlight for the moon." I only had one word for Daisy: trash. Later, Daisy called me again, sounding pitiful. She claimed she couldn't find a suitable place to rent and asked if she could crash at my place for a few days, even offering to sleep on the couch. Why should I care? When we were together, I willingly spent on her, but now that we were broken up, what was it to me? I was blunt with her. I thought maybe she'd feel some shame and stay away. I clearly underestimated how shameless she could be. I hadn't had the chance to change the door code yet, and without warning, she just moved back in. She said she couldn't believe I was so heartless, and if that were true, why hadn't I changed the code? I almost sent her the evidence of her 2-month cohabitation with that jerk. I kicked Daisy out, then locked the door behind me. She stood outside yelling for about half an hour, but I ignored her. Eventually, security had to escort her away. Later, I heard from our mutual friends that Daisy was now determined to find a wealthy boyfriend. She still had many suitors, but none of them caught her eye. The Miller couple had given her a mission: she had to find someone rich, someone who could buy her a house and a car. I couldn't help but laugh. I had said those things to make Daisy regret it, and now it seemed like her entire family was equally greedy. Luca later reached out to me on social media. He said he had found a new job and was planning to buy a house in a great location. Then, he awkwardly started hinting around, asking if he could borrow money from me. He said, "Don't worry, I'll pay you back. You know my character." But why should I trust your character? I made an excuse, telling him all my money was tied up in investments and the stock market, and encouraged him to take out a loan instead. I told him, "Go ahead and take out a loan. Time waits for no one, and when my money comes through, I'll lend it to you to pay off the loan. No interest, of course." Luca was thrilled, saying, "You're the best." The day he bought the house, he told me he wanted to treat me to a meal to thank me, because without my help, he wouldn't have been able to buy it so quickly. From what he was saying, had taken out a loan for almost $1 million. I called him an idiot and immediately blocked him. I felt no guilt at all. This was his comeuppance.